Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian Norton, and welcome to Crossing the Political Chasm, Understanding the Perceived Ideologies of Web3 and Crypto and Their Impact on Adoption. Yes, I am taking notes on that name. We're going to, before we get started, just a little introduction of me. I'm COO of MyEtherWallet. If you're not familiar with MyEtherWallet, we are the first wallet interface to ever deploy to the Ethereum blockchain. We launched about 3 weeks after Ethereum went to mainnet. So if you've been in the space for a while, you may remember us as your first wallet. And if you're new to the space, you might know us as your current wallet, if you know what's good for you. That will be the end of the shill part of this talk, because the rest of it is going to deal with political ideologies and how they affect crypto adoption and like their downfalls and kind of what we can do about it. So let's step on the third rail. I want to start off with what this talk is not about. This is not an endorsement of any particular political ideology. Not on part of myself or on the part of Mew. We're just going to kind of be discussing how these ideologies play out in the space. It's not condemnation of any political ideologies, except, of course, all of the evil ones. And then, there we go. And any of the projects that I might name drop here, we are not affiliated with them. They're not endorsements of those projects. They're just projects that we think that I think might be illustrative of these different sort of like ideological diversity within the space. So yeah, we're going to be doing an overview of the political ideologies surrounding the narratives that affect Web3 in popular discourse, the criticisms that are fueled by these narratives, and how these narratives are effective. I mean, I think if you've been in the space over the last year, we've been under increasing scrutiny, and a lot of these narratives have been very sticky. And so we're going to kind of talk about why that is, and then discuss potential remedies that I see. So this is the overview. Now, there is no, like, I don't think anything up here is particularly controversial. Bitcoin launches in, well over a decade ago, where it is based on an Austrian economic model. It's deflationary. There was always a libertarian influence in crypto. It's kind of where we came from. The libertarian ideology has contributed a lot to the development of this space, and as a result, we see that reflected in who is adopting crypto. So I've taken this is from a kind of CoinDesk overview, and I think it's fairly accurate. The center is the center here is where we see most of our adoption there. These are the early adopters, people who came into the space looking for an alternative to fiat, people who are interested in getting back to the gold standard. These kinds of narratives really attracted people into the space. On the left, you get a little bit of progressivism, but like there's not a whole lot of popular narratives that are appealing to them directly, and so people on the left of center on the spectrum, they kind of get left out of it. There's like certain narratives around identity that they can gravitate to that have been published in popular media, but it really hasn't like broken through in those communities. And then unfortunately we have the evil ones. Like, we're all aware of them. They're also like, I'm only even putting them up there because it speaks to like how far right crypto's appeal goes in a way that we don't really see corresponding on the left. And some people, depending upon your own personal ideology, you might not consider that a problem. But I'm going to make the case to you that it is, and it's something that we should address. For the purposes of the rest of this talk, we're just going to assume that this handy-dandy Venn diagram from 2018 from Quartz is just true. That we're all somewhere on the libertarian spectrum, and that's just how it is, because it just makes the whole conversation a lot simpler. So let's get into the criticisms. Now, I've identified basically 3 narratives that have emerged like pretty consistently over the last year. And you'll all be familiar with this one, like the environmental narrative. Basically, you know, everybody on using Bitcoin and Ethereum, we're mowing down the rainforest, we're burning it down, and it's to so we can mint our monkey pictures. Like, that's the narrative that we keep seeing played out over and over and over again, and it plays extremely well. These 2 tweets are from earlier this week, and they came out within a day of each other, and they're 2 left-leaning politicians in the US, Dick Durbin and Elizabeth Warren. They've been attacking crypto on kind of like a number of fronts, but this one gets a lot of traction. Like the idea that like energy consumption is that our energy consumption is outsized, and that this is unsustainable, and aside from it being a threat to the US dollar, like we're also just this environmental bane. And it's pretty compelling. You see it a lot on, in this tweet in particular from Dick Durbin, talking about to learn the truth about crypto, as if anybody as if anybody who's even heard of crypto in the last year wouldn't be familiar with this this energy criticism. And it does 2 things. It rallies people around the narrative, but it also draws out the actually crowd. So in response to this tweet, you get a lot of, well, actually, are you familiar with the merge? As if Dick Durbin cares about the merge. Dick Durbin understands the merge, cares about the merge at all. The idea of this thing that he doesn't want to exist using less energy doesn't make any difference to him or his constituents. And that's why I can continue to play, because that actually crowd just kind of makes us all look like we are the threat that we're being portrayed as being. The second criticism it's been around for a while, and it's a criticism of market-based solutions in general, the financialization of everything. This is a narrative that's been around since the 80s, since the yuppie era. The idea that increasingly every part of our life will become monetized and put up for sale. And and Web3 has been characterized a lot in popular media as being sort of like the final manifestation of that, the digitalization of the financialization of everything. Now, never mind that the internet has been financialized since the advent of Web 2, and is now being has been monopolized in that time. But now that we're now actually individual people are there's going to be this idea that Web3 is going to be gatekeeping the internet, and it's almost a toll system, and it's just it's a way for people to extract extract value and rent seek on something that we've all sort of been socialized to believe should be free, should be open. One of the things that I think is kind of interesting about this narrative is that is that the idea that like this is specifically the solutions that we are pitching. That there are that the idea of individuals using the internet as a way of not only as a source of information, as a source of interaction, but also a means of receiving recompense for their contributions to the internet. That somehow that is a to the detriment of like the free and open internet that we've already experienced. In particular, NFT mania has been part of this. Like this idea that previously memes were free, and like this sort of intersection between financialization and meme culture and art culture constitutes like some sort of paradigm shift. But when in actuality, it sort of just mirrors what happens and has been happening in the traditional art world for time immemorial. We just don't see it. Unless, I don't know, are there any fine art traders in the audience? No? No? Me neither. And then finally, the failure of market solutions. This is sort of a schadenfreude. You know, when like left-leaning narratives are obviously critical of market-based solutions. And so this this sort of plays well, because when we fail, it can be catastrophic. When we as an ecosystem fail, when there are exploits and $200 million losses, it reinforces the narrative that market-based solutions are not the solution, that market-based solutions are not going to be like the way forward in creating a more equitable internet, and in fact will do just the opposite. And this happens in and because it happens in such rapid succession, there's a lot of fuel on the fire. Like, we are an experimental space. We are a tech space first, and we are iterating on this in real time with real assets, and we see that as a net positive. Like, this is how we build the financial systems of the future. This is how we build the new internet. But from the outside, for somebody who is interested in economic justice, somebody who is interested in the rights of workers, for whom financialization is viewed with skepticism at best, this is really damning evidence that further marketization is not what we need right now. And so one of the things that I think is really interesting about this is the narrative that crypto, Bitcoin in particular, but crypto in general, is this hedge against inflation. But what I think is interesting is that there's actually evidence that we helped inflation along a little bit. Over the last couple of years, over the course of the pandemic, we created massive amounts of wealth for a lot of different people. And this statistic I think was interesting. Almost 12% of new first-time home buyers who bought through Redfin reported that they were able to pay for their down payment due to crypto gains, which of course drove up we had a little hand in driving up home prices and contributing to inflation, according to a few analysts. And so that kind of counteracts our the anti-inflation narrative that in popular media has been really driven home to a lot of people outside of the ecosystem. So why are these narratives so effective? I think that first off, they speak to a value set rather than fears. Like, these are not actually like criticisms that are based out of like a fear of these things, but it actually is just a demonstration that like a genuinely held value set that sits left of the center is not being met. Like it doesn't fit, like these narratives don't fit the criteria of what is considered ethical business behavior, ethical business behavior, ethical political behavior. The elimination of one doesn't negate the others. The merge can drop energy consumption down to 0. And it won't make a difference because at the end of the day, the idea of you spending any amount of energy so you can mint a monkey picture and sell it for $1 million is just antithetical to my value set. And they have the benefit of all being partially true, at the very least. Our energy consumption is too high. People do lose a lot of money. And there is a definite contingent of Web3 applications that contribute to this financialization of everything. So, and then the most damning thing of all is we as a community have done nothing to leverage the ideological diversity that I know exists in this space. So the idea that we are a monolithic community, that we somehow have a decentralized monolithic community that sits exclusively on the right side of this political spectrum is just kind of fundamentally false. But at this point, we're not doing enough to promote that. And so that's where we get into these kinds of potential remedies. And the first one is to admit it's a problem. Now, regardless of whether or not you, as a, I'm sure we all have political opinions, and I'm sure some of them are a little, perhaps a little divorced from mine. I've been to articulate my own potential bias. I've always been a man of the left, generally speaking, and so so I know, because I'm here, that there are other people who view some of these things similar to me, and that's why I kind of understand why people on the outside can't see what benefit Web3 has for their lives, because they can't see their value set reflected back to them. And that's something that we have to change, and in order to do that, we have to admit that this is a problem that needs to be addressed, and regardless of our own political opinions, we need to leverage that ideological diversity. And so one of the things that I would encourage, what I want to encourage people to do as you start moving your way through your space, you're building your own projects, you're investing in projects, is looking at it's taking note and educating ourselves on value compatible projects in the space that are not necessarily left leaning, but offer a service that is compatible with that value set, compatible with public goods funding, as we could see it with Gitcoin and I forget what this acronym means. Retro public goods funding. Got it. And coordination and organizing. It's sort of we are at a point where coordination and governance is some of the major innovation work that is happening in this space. And like there are all people, all sorts of people on the left, labor unions, activist organizations that can benefit from pseudo-anonymity, working within DAO structures with a decentralized governance. But because of like these popular narratives, they're not getting access to that. They're not coming into the space. They're not contributing. They're not those people are not building. And then universal basic income. We're the only space really outside of governments that are experimenting with this sort of thing, and that's not getting out. That's not breaking through the barrier because it doesn't make a sexy headline the way $200 million losses do. And so the way that we can really leverage these things is by amplifying and integrating them. Like finding compatible projects to what we're building and amplifying those so we can leverage it to these new audiences and bring this diversity of voices into the space, because it's really only going to help. It's really only going to help us build out new economic models, new financial models, new social models that right now we're not conceiving of because we're not properly utilizing those resources and those perspectives. And that is it for me. Thank you very much. I don't know if we have time for questions.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have answers to them, but I'll take them nevertheless.
So, are there any questions?
What do you think of, since we are at a Web3 conference, we're all into Web3 now, what do you think of privacy of personal information, data privacy, and the choice over sharing your data as kind of a unifying narrative that could, attract people across the board, because recent, issues with Facebook and Google and all that have come to the attention of the left as well, in different ways probably than the right. What do you think of that?
So it's interesting because across the ideological spectrum, there is this sort of disgruntledness with like these Web2 platforms in terms of censorship, and there's active debates on like sort of both sides on like what is okay to censor, what is okay not to censor, and what is okay for them to mine, what is okay for them to sell. And I think that that is a unifying factor, particularly for people in marginalized communities who really can't, who have suffered historic discrimination, either in the jobs market and that has been overtaken by Web2 platforms. Web3 offers an opportunity for us to abstract a lot of that away and give users the choice to preserve their data and protect themselves from that kind of discrimination. So yeah, that is, I think, a compelling narrative that is not yet being pushed through, and it needs to be.
Are there additional questions?
Hey, thanks for the great talk. It's very inspiring. I'm going to be broad and anecdotal with my questions, so feel free to disagree with me. And I don't want to be too political either, but one of the impressions I get, the differences between, let's say, the US and Europe is that public goods funding in Europe is typically out of tax dollars, overwhelmingly. In the US as well, but less so, and there's much more focus or reliance on charitable donations from the wealthy 1%. Given that we are, like it or not, globally, everyone in this room is part of the global 1%, most likely. Which side of that kind of line do you think that Web3 public goods funding sits on? I mean, effectively, what these protocols are doing right now are donating from the 1% to the many, which is admirable, but how does it line up with your kind of characterization of public goods funding as being something that kind of would maybe move the Web3 world more towards the left, if that's an accurate way of describing it.
I think I understand what you're asking. So you're basically saying like from a left-leaning perspective, like much of public good funding should be coming from tax dollars, like from a left-leaning perspective, and so go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
There is no mechanism by which you can enforce the taxation on Web3 users right now, which is probably for the best. But that means, by definition, at least in my mind, that any kind of public goods funding that is funded through Web3 is implicit closer to a charitable donation model than it is to a kind of a more a UBI or public goods funding that you would expect to see on the left.
No, that's absolutely true. So we are not there. Like, we are not there yet, and I think that's actually one of the reasons why I think where I feel like in order to get to that point where we're building those kinds of like those economic models that alternative economic models that can support public goods funding in a way other than what's happening right now, which is, like you said, much closer to a charitable donation. We have to like get it out of our ecosystem that these coordination opportunities and these distribution, like these primitives can be used for these kinds of models if somebody can build them, if somebody will come in and build them. Who knows how it'll manifest when those people do come in, how successful it'll be, how much adoption it'll get. But right now, I don't feel like those things are even being truly conceived of because the people who are most incentivized to do that kind of work are not coming into the space. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we are unfortunately out of time now. So in case you have additional questions, just follow up with the speaker afterwards, I guess.
No, I'm going to be hiding.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.